This is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of the Contrarian. I am delighted to welcome to our program for the first time Representative Jake Auchincloss. Welcome.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's very nice to have you. So the House has pushed this continuing resolution over to the Senate. And so far, Senate Democrats have said, we didn't have any part in this bill, we didn't draft it, and we're not voting for it. Is there any reason why Democrats should vote for this CR?
No, it's a blank check for Donald Trump to continue to pump chaos and corruption into the executive branch, into the broader economy. And Senate Democrats voting for this would put their imprimatur on what would be 6 more months of undermining the separation of powers and delivering more wins for oligarchs than for the middle class.
It's such an important point. We've heard buzz that they're afraid that somehow shutting down the government would make it more difficult to access the courts, or the courts were shut down. But that's not the case. In fact, once the Senate Democrats, if they do, if they go along with Trump, as you say, won't the administration say, well, Democrats went along with us. They authorized this kind of unilateral chopping up of the bureaucracy, and they would seem to have a very good argument.
That's exactly right. There is at stake here fundamentally the power of the purse. And Jen, as you know, the power of the purse has defined the tension between the legislature and the executive branch since before there was a United States. Parliament literally cut off a king's head because he refused to accept that they had the power of the purse. So this is not a new issue, and yet it's a foundational one. It's something that Hamilton and Madison well understood was going to be core to how to make ambition counteract ambition, to use Madison's term. And if Democrats now sign on to a CR that says, one, hey, Donald, your use of emergency powers is A-OK, so keep going. And two, that we're actually going to remove rather than add congressionally sanctioned language for how you have to spend these funds, then what we are doing is making ourselves a board of advisors rather than legislature. And that's how Speaker Johnson conceives of his Article 1 responsibility. He thinks he's a courtier. He thinks he's there to reduce friction and pave the path for Donald Trump's every whim, as opposed to seeing himself as a constitutionally sanctioned check on his power.
Exactly. So we do see these ongoing court battles, and many of them, frankly, are being successful. Today, a federal court judge authorized and ordered the return of probationary employees who had been illegally let go. We've seen the courts come to the rescue on everything from returning to office, independent agency heads, to not allowing Trump to proceed with his birthright citizenship unilateral repeal. Are you surprised or comforted or wary about the federal bench? It seems that they're doing a fairly good job, at least at the district court level, holding the line.
They are. Where this is headed is towards some critical jurisprudence from the Supreme Court on two separate questions. The first question is going to be about what's called unitary executive theory. And I know you know what that is, Jen, but for our listeners, unitary executive theory is the conservative principle that the president is master and commander of the executive branch. There is no such thing as an independent agency, and so he can fire the chair of the National Labor Relations Board or dismantle the Department of Education, because anything within the remit of Article 2 is subject to his whim. Based on the composition of the Supreme Court and how they have spoken and voted in the past, I expect that they're going to be actually pretty sympathetic to the unitary executive theory. I think they are going to issue rulings that expand the president's power within the executive branch. So that's a piece of bad news, because I personally don't believe in the unitary executive theory. I think Congress can tell the executive branch precisely what to do and how to behave. But here's the good news. I think the second set of rulings are going to be about how the president relates to Congress. And there I expect that this Supreme Court is going to be deferential to Congress relative to the president. That they're going to say Congress can tell the president what to spend, how to spend, where to spend, what not to spend, and he has to obey. The Republic can survive those two classes of rulings. If those are the rulings that come out, and if they are respected, the Republic will stand. If they do not support the congressional power of the purse, we have a much bigger problem.
It's a very sobering thought, which I frankly agree with entirely. We now see that in the effort to stoke the culture wars and to stoke his xenophobic base, that Donald Trump seems to be moving towards some declaration under the Alien and Sedition Act, which is a 18th century law that was frankly thought to be unconstitutional when John Adams, used it. How concerned are you that they're going to use these sorts of powers, or, for example, national security that they are invoking to deport a green card holder? The courts, unfortunately, have been extremely deferential to the executive when it comes to those kinds of powers. How do you see that playing out?
The Alien and Sedition Acts were a black eye for the Adams administration. They'd be a black eye for the Trump administration in the history books. My understanding of their deportation attempts against this green card holder, though, is that it's not based on the Alien Sedition Act. It's based under existing authorities under the Immigration and Naturalization Act.
That is correct.
And the INA does give the president the authority to deport a green card holder if they find that they're supporting terrorist activities or adversarial to the interests of the United States. They're going to have to lay out a fact pattern that comports with that law in front of a judge, and the judge is going to have to rule. Clearly, the government has a bar to clear here. But on the broader case that you're mentioning, Jen, of using either the Alien and Sedition Acts or the Insurrection Act to claim enormous powers, and I would argue violate the Posse Comitatus Act, this is an example of why Congress needs to rein in executive action. And both parties here are guilty. Let's be clear. Democratic and Republican presidents, really since FDR, have been expanding the mandate of the presidency at the expense of Congress and of states. And there is an opportunity, I think, after the midterms, if Democrats win the midterms and we are able to lame duck Donald Trump, there will be a year before the next presidential election kicks off when Congress could engage in a spasm of good governance and pass things like the Article 1 Act or the revocation of emergency powers under IEPA, which gives the president way too much power over tariffs, for example, rein in war powers for the president. We could really box back in Article 2 to where it belongs.
Well, I certainly hope you are right, and I feel like we're kind of in a race to the midterms. Do they destroy the Constitution before we get there? The other issue, of course, is the economy. Donald Trump was elected primarily because he was going to make eggs cheaper, and we were supposedly in a terrible recession. Everything was wrong with the economy, and he has crashed the stock markets. We're engaged now in a trade war with Canada. We are looking potentially at a recession. What do your constituents say? Have they begun to feel that yet, or is it now still a little theoretical to them? In other words, are you hearing from constituents that stuff is getting more expensive and they're worried about the economy?
I was at a local Chamber of Commerce meeting a couple weeks ago and spoke to a prominent local manufacturer. He builds widgets for bigger companies that they use then in their own manufacturing. And what he told me was, the end user demand for the products that we are making is still quite robust. But what's happening is the bigger businesses, because of tariff uncertainty, because of geopolitical chaos, because of ever-shifting regulations, are starting to push pause on their order books. And what that's doing is it's cascading onto small and medium enterprises who are now starting to push pause on hiring. And this is how a president can talk a good economy into a recession. Doesn't have to pass any policy. He just injects uncertainty into the macroeconomy, and uncertainty is poison for business. That's even before, Jen, we get to 25% tariffs on Canadian lumber, which is what my constituents use to build houses. It's what home insurance companies use to repair houses, which means home insurance premiums are going to go up. Car insurance premiums are going to go up with the steel and aluminum and semiconductor tariffs. Utility bills are going to go up as they spike Canadian electricity. life's going to get more expensive for my constituents, and they're going to know who to blame.
Um, doesn't seem like we're getting either democracy or cheaper eggs. As we reach the end of our time, I want to ask you about the coming recess. What are you going to be doing? Are you going to be back in your district? Are you going to be holding town halls? What are your plans for the next week or so?
We've done, I believe, 8 town halls since he was elected
Wow.
throughout my district, north and south, red cities and blue cities. I'll do another town hall, yes, next week, talking to constituents. And I think it's important to be engaged. I know Republicans don't like doing town halls these days, but I do think it's critical for Democrats to be engaged, uh, to to be communicating in a bi-directional way. And I'd also like to see us to start doing town halls in Republican districts.
Yes. Yes, I think they have been spared the insult and the difficulty of having to actually defend what they are doing. And I don't know that they're capable of defending some of these votes and some of the actions that are being taken.
If you don't talk to your constituents, they talk to you at the ballot box. And I think our Republican colleagues are going to find that out. I've debated a number of Republicans in various formats, and I've always offered to them, hey, you guys want to extend the Trump tax cuts? Well, we're not going to do it for the top 1%. But if you take out the tax cuts for the top 1%, which account for a majority of the cost of the bill, and you just extend them for the middle class, you don't have to touch Medicaid, and we'll work with you on the pay-fors. And they have no answer for that. We have to be able to draw that contrast.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much, Congressman, for coming on. I'm sure we're going to have you back. We're going to see if we win the race to preserve the Constitution. I certainly hope so. So thank you for all you're doing, and thank you for articulating the constitutional as well as the political argument. We'll see you next time.